I had a couple that reached out to me. They were making great household income. One was an engineer, one was in tech. They were bringing in about $280,000 total. And they said, hey, Austin, although we're making good income, we feel like we're stuck. And I go, well, yeah, you're well within the 10% of Canadian household income. Why do you feel stuck? And they said they recently purchased a house a little bit below $1.3 million, and that stretched themselves financially. They have to save money for the mortgage, housing expenses, children, and day-to-day life, and things are getting more expensive. So they're finding it incredibly difficult to set money aside for their future retirement goals. And they said, I feel like I should be doing better. And this is a common problem for people with high household income in Canada because taxes take such a big chunk of it. So then I ask a bit more information about their investments to understand where they're coming from. They want to save for retirement, but they feel like they're not hitting their goals, especially when they took a big chunk of their investments to purchase their first home. So in RSPs, they had about $125,000 left. TFSAs, give or take, around the same, so $125,000 there. The rate of return is 7.5% as an estimate. This is quite conservative. This is before considering inflation. Obviously, it's possible for markets to return much less than that, but over a long-term average, 7.5% seems more than reasonable. And so that would bring the portfolio value to about $951K in 30 years from now, which is the target retirement date. So we can see that is a total value of $1.9 million. Now that sounds fantastic on paper, but remember, there's inflation that happens in the background, and that erodes your purchasing power. So if we adjust for inflation, that's actually a portfolio close towards $930,000 in today's value. Still not a small amount, but not where they want to be in terms of retirement goal. If we take the simple 4% rule, saying that you can spend 4% of your portfolio in perpetuity without ever having to run out of money, it looks like they can spend about $37,000 in today's value from this portfolio. Okay, this is assuming they don't invest $1 more. After speaking with them, they've said, yeah, we do plan to invest, but it's going to be incredibly difficult, right? Just because we have all of these things going on in life. I think if we really put our head down and we work hard, we might be able to scrape $24,000 extra a year. Okay, perfect. So the rate of return, 7.5%. That would bring you to a portfolio value of close to $2.5 million. In today's dollar, that's closer towards $1.4 million. Okay, using the 4% rule on this portfolio, that would mean an additional $58,000 in today's dollars that they could pull out. So the total amount that they can spend is roughly around $96,000. Keep in mind, this is a gross figure. You have to consider tax implications. Obviously, connect with the financial advisor. This gives you a rough idea, though. And this is not necessarily the retirement that they're looking for, especially if currently they're making $280,000 as a household. And while this is a lot of money, it's not going to get them the retirement that they want, especially because they're making a lot more income today. Everyone has their own sets of financial goals. And so I've told them the truth. The truth is, all of the hard work, all of the effort you put in to increase your income is not going to be the same strategy that you have to do to build wealth. What I mean by that is once you start getting taxed at 44 or 45% for every dollar you make, it's incredibly difficult to continue to save your way to financial freedom. And that's where smarter mortgage strategies and tax planning come in. So I introduced the concept of the Smith Manoeuvre to them to make their mortgage more tax efficient. As it stands right now, their primary home is not tax deductible. They're not able to write off the interest there. And as a result, they have to earn gross income from their full-time job, pay income taxes, and whatever's remaining is then being used to pay down the mortgage. Absolutely brutal. Our goal is to convert their interest to become tax deductible instead, because if they're able to write off their mortgage interest, they get tax refunds and they can use that to pay down their mortgage quicker. And that's where the Smith Maneuver comes in. Just as a quick example, before we get into the client's number, we can see here there's a mortgage that's $500,000. The interest is not tax deductible, meaning that you can't write it off. Pay attention. You're going to see this non-tax deductible mortgage convert into a tax deductible HELOC. So as you see, you're going to make regular mortgage payments and your mortgage is going to get lower, lower, and lower. If you have the right mortgage structure, known as a readvanceable mortgage, your home equity line of credit opens up and gets bigger, bigger, and bigger. Now, you can borrow from the home equity line of credit for cheap interest rates and use that money to invest. So what we're noticing as well is that the investment portfolio is growing as well. Now, note the investments can't be anything. It needs to have a reasonable ability to generate income, right? So you can't just simply put that money in gold because gold does not generate income. Right? It needs to be income generating investments. Oftentimes people like to do index funds. So as we can see here, as they continue to make the regular mortgage payments, they're going to reborrow the principal from the home equity line of credit. They're going to take that money off the home equity line of credit and invest as well to take advantage of compound interest. And so we're going to go through to see how this number works for the client. So over here, the client is about roughly a 45% marginal tax bracket, okay? Right now, their mortgage is this green line. So it is a $980,000 mortgage, roughly, give or take. And as we can see, it's going to take 25 years to pay down. This is a traditional mortgage. What we want to do is we want to convert this into tax-deductible debt. That means debt that we can write off. To do that, we make regular mortgage payments, okay? So this blue line is your non-tax deductible debt if you run the Smith maneuver. You're going to do regular mortgage payments as you do. And what's going to end up happening is that your non-tax deductible debt's going to go down slowly, slowly, slowly. But at the same time, we're investing these mortgage payments into income generating investments. So we're going to get tax deductions. Those tax deductions are going to continue to reduce the non-tax deductible debt. So as we do the Smith maneuver, we see that the first couple of years, not a big difference because your tax refunds are quite small. The tax refunds for these clients are only a couple $100s for the first few years, but it snowballs. The longer they do this strategy, the bigger the tax refunds are. You know, a tax refund on a $400,000 or $500,000 HELOC is a lot bigger than a tax refund on a $1,000 HELOC. So we can see by year 11, 12, 13, the gap is getting bigger and bigger and bigger between a traditional mortgage and one where you're running the Smith maneuver. By year 22, you have no more mortgage. All of your tax refunds, all of your regular mortgage payments have been used to pay down your non-tax deductible debt. So that's fantastic. But remember, the Smith maneuver, at the same time, we're taking this money back out in the home equity line of credit to invest it. So this purple line here is the HELOC. We're showing the client that the tax deductible debt is getting larger and larger and larger. However, you're able to write off the interest here. And so the client said, Austin, this sounds fantastic, but my HELOC rate is larger than my mortgage rate. That's a little bit worrisome. And that is a fair question. So let's break it down. So as we can see here, let's say the client's HELOC rate is about 4.95% and their marginal tax rate is about 45%. It's in between 44 and 45%, but we're going to round it here, for example. After tax rate is going to be 4.95 multiplied by 1 minus 45%. So the after-tax interest rate that they're paying is actually 2.72%. What this means is basically the client is paying 4.95% in interest, but they're able to write it off. So what's going to happen is the CRA is going to get 45% of those interest payments back. They're going to use that to pay down the non-tax deductible debt. Effectively, if you run the math, this is equivalent to a 2.72% after-tax interest rate. Their non-tax deductible debt, which is their mortgage, is currently incurring an interest rate of 4.09%. So there's already a large gap, right? We can see here 4.09% minus 2.72%. There's already a gap of 1.37%. And if rates go up, let's say rates go up by, I like to use 2% as an example. So that's 8 rate hikes. The after-tax interest rate is going to be 3.82%, right? Even if rates go up 8 times. And the thing is that if their HELOC goes up, by the time they renew the mortgage, their non-tax deductible debt is probably closer towards 5.99%, right? So the gap between their after-tax rate doing the Smith maneuver versus the non-tax deductible debt is actually bigger. It's 2.17%. So when you're in a high tax bracket and you're doing a strategy like this, it's actually more advantageous in a higher rate environment because you have even more savings and get larger tax refunds. So it shows that if you're in a high tax bracket, this strategy can actually hedge you against future rate increases because it creates tax deductions. So let's flip back to the chart over here. You can see in year 22, there is no more mortgage, but there is a HELOC remaining. The HELOC remains at $800,000, but remember, this is all tax deductible. Now, the other question that the client says to me is to say, Austin, this sounds fantastic, but this HELOC, I have to make interest payments on it, don't I? So like if I have to save money for my HELOC payments, plus I'm making my mortgage payments all this time, I'm not going to have enough money to do this strategy, and that's a valid concern. However, that's a common misunderstanding of the Smith maneuver. When you do this strategy properly, the HELOC interest payments get paid from the HELOC itself. What I mean by that is that let's say that you have a principal pay down in your mortgage of about $2,000. You're not going to invest all $2,000. You may invest $1,700. Okay, so this is going to be invested, which still leaves a gap of your HELOC for about $300 in unused space. And this gap is what's going to be used to service the interest. On top of that, the principal that you pay in your mortgage gets bigger and bigger every single month. As your loan balance gets smaller, the amount of principal and interest in your mortgage payments shifts stronger towards principal and less towards interest. So next month, maybe they're paying $2,050 in principal. The month after that, maybe $2,100. But more and more goes towards principal while the investment rate stays the same. So then your HELOC limit still continues to go up larger and larger and larger. And this HELOC limit is going to remain large enough to service all of the interest payments when doing this strategy. In other words, if you do this strategy correctly, it's not going to cost you any additional money out of pocket. You don't need to save any more money. You don't need to earn any more money. Your lifestyle stays the exact same. You're just using the efficiencies of your mortgage to implement this strategy properly. Now, as we can see here, this red line is the investment portfolio. We're assuming compounding is 7.5%, which we did in the previous example with the existing portfolio. So as we can see, the gap gets larger and larger and larger simply because the investments are compounding are at a larger growth rate than their HELOC itself. And so this is where we see the spread happen. Over the duration of doing this strategy, the client is going to get about $206,000 in tax savings. Their investment portfolio is going to be $1.5 million over the time horizon of doing this strategy. And that is a net worth gain of $708,000 versus doing a regular mortgage. Keep in mind, if they were to do a regular mortgage and not implement this strategy, they're going to be spending about $575,000 in interest, as we can see in our calculator here, right? That being said, doing the Smith maneuver, because their net worth is climbing by $708,000, this net worth gain is far more significant than the cost of interest in the regular mortgage. So not only are you getting a net worth gain, this net worth gain basically negates all of the interest you would have paid otherwise. And if you really want, you could definitely sell your portfolio earlier by year 20 or 21 to get rid of your mortgage. And that in itself shaves about 4 years off of your mortgage. Now, the client said, Austin, this plan is fantastic. I love the fact that I don't have to save anymore. I don't have to earn anymore. And I'm still building wealth for my future. And I agree with you. I'm spending way too much in taxes, but I'm worried about the leverage. This is something I hear from a lot of clients, and this is my response. If you are taking a mortgage and that mortgage is expected to be paid over 25 years, if you end up, knock on wood, losing your job year 22, you still need to find a way to make that mortgage payment regardless until that mortgage payment is fully paid off, right? Otherwise, the bank will take it. And with the Smith maneuver, it's the same principle in terms of we're not asking you to invest or save any extra dollars. We're just using your mortgage payment to invest. So as long as you can afford to make the mortgage payment, you can continue to operate this strategy. Strategy is not meant for someone who wants to do it for 2 or 3 years because Remember, I'm going to flip it back here. The difference is that it starts snowballing about a decade in, and that's what investing is all about, compound growth. The other thing is that if you're comfortable taking debt today, which is about $984,000, first and foremost, your debt load is going to be less, right? Your debt load is going to be closer towards $800,000 by the end of it, fully tax deductible. Your portfolio can be sold to cover it if you want, but if you're comfortable taking that debt today, you're not taking any additional debt beyond that. You're able to afford it. It's able to fit within your lifestyle. You're going to be making those mortgage payments anyways, so we're just making your mortgage work for you instead. Yes, in theory, your debt remains the same. It's just that your debt becomes more tax efficient, and concurrently on the other side, you're building a long-term portfolio. If you're able to stick this strategy out for the long term, this is a great way to add supplement wealth on top of your TFSAs, on top of your RSPs. You're still going to be doing all of that, but you can implement this strategy alongside with it. Before we wrap up, let me be clear. For these particular clients, they believed in investing in the long term. They were not short-term thinkers, and they were okay with volatility. And if they were to implement this strategy, they were willing to do it for a few decades. And so they were the perfect fit for a strategy like this. However, I've spoken to clients and talked them out of doing this because it's not a right fit for their particular circumstances. Everyone's situation is different. And so if you are interested in doing a strategy similar to this, feel free to book a free strategy call with me. You can do so down in the description below. And if you want to learn more about this strategy, I also have a free mini course on it. So that will also be down in the description. And lastly, if you enjoyed this video, please share it with a family member. Please share it with a friend. It's a great way to continue to add value to the community and show Canadians that you can make your mortgage work for you and build long-term wealth.